Is it the revival of a pipe dream? The Keystone XL pipeline expansion project canceled twice, maybe back on the table.
After meeting with the U.S. president, CTV News confirms the two discussed reviving the Keystone XL pipeline.
Did you and Mr. Trump agree to revive the Keystone XL pipeline?
Very good discussions on a wide range of issues, and I look forward to talking to Parliament.
We're going to be talking about trade. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things.
They say politics is the art of the possible, but in Canada today, it feels increasingly like a high-stakes game of tug-of-war between provinces, Ottawa, and Washington. On October 13, 2025, that tension came into full view.
Did you and Mr. Trump agree to revive the Keystone XL pipeline?
Very good discussions on a wide range of issues, and I look forward to talking to Parliament.
When Prime Minister Mark Carney reportedly raised the prospect of reviving the long-dead Keystone XL pipeline during a White House meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. That single move, sources say, flipped political calculations from coast to coast. But before we accept the resurrection, we must ask, how serious is this? What's driving it? Who stands to gain or lose? And what may be the cost, both politically and economically? Carney's meeting with Trump isn't merely a diplomatic photo op. According to multiple sources, the pipeline revival came up as part of broader discussions around tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. The idea is to tie energy integration to alleviating trade pressure. In that context, Keystone XL is being floated not just as infrastructure, but as a bargaining chip. The pipeline was designed to carry up to 830,000 barrels per day of crude from Hardisty, Alberta to Steel City, Nebraska, linking into the U.S. Gulf Coast supply network. It was canceled in 2021 after years of environmental battles, legal fights, and permit revocations under the Biden administration. Now, with Canada facing heavy U.S. tariffs on its metal exports, some as high as 50%, and Alberta pressing for new export routes, the timing has drawn sharp attention. One insider told Reuters that Carney floated the idea of reviving the Keystone XL pipeline amid growing pressure in Canada to address U.S. tariffs on steel, autos, and other goods. Yet multiple caveats remain. The pipeline is dead on paper, all permits lapsed, many easements dissolved, and the original proponent, TC Energy, officially walked away in 2021. Alberta's government itself confirms that it ended its partnership with TC Energy and has taken legal steps to recoup legacy costs, reportedly about 1.3 billion Canadian dollars after the termination. So revival would really mean rebuild from scratch, with new design, permits, Indigenous consultation, financing, and legal risk. While the federal government dithered, Alberta moved decisively. In early October, Premier Danielle announced her government would submit by spring 2026 an application for a new West Coast crude pipeline, not as a builder, but as a proponent, with private firms like Enbridge, South Bow, and Trans Mountain slated to advise technically. The province pledged $14 million toward early planning. Smith is also actively pushing Ottawa to drop certain environmental rules inherited from previous governments, such as a cap on emissions from oil and gas and a tanker ban off BC's coast. She's in Ottawa pushing for federal cooperation on energy projects. Her urgency is partly political. Under her leadership, Alberta has also simplified rules for citizens to initiate referendums through Bill 54, raising the possibility of a provincial referendum on separation in 2026 if tensions escalate. Smith recently told reporters she will not allow trade choke points or federal policy to bleed investment from the province. Local small business owners in Calgary are already feeling the strain. "We export energy products and parts across the border," said one mid-size pump manufacturer. "If we can't get capacity or routes, projects stall. People get laid off." Meanwhile, some farmers along possible pipeline routes express caution. One landowner noted he'd lost faith in promises from both federal and provincial governments after years of delays. Alberta is essentially sending a signal: if Ottawa won't act, we will drive the ship, even courting Washington directly. The renewed pipeline talk has already rippled across Alberta's workforce. The province's construction unions, representing more than 35,000 workers, said they are ready to mobilize within weeks if new infrastructure approvals are granted. Local investors in the energy services sector are cautiously optimistic, noting that even the prospect of a new pipeline has lifted market confidence by almost 4% on the Calgary Energy Index this week. Trucking and logistics firms that serve the oil sands are also eyeing potential expansion, with one company executive saying, "We've been through shutdowns, layoffs, and price crashes. What we need now is stability, something we can actually build on." From Ottawa's perspective, reviving Keystone XL is fraught. On one hand, it offers a tangible lever, energy diplomacy, to manage U.S. tariff pressure. On the other, it risks torpedoing climate credibility and exposing the federal government to accusations of wild policy reversal. Carney's public posture remains cautious. He's acknowledged the possibility of many possible projects, including Keystone XL, but declined to commit. At a roundtable with business leaders, he framed it as one among several energy options. Officials, speaking off the record, say Carney linked the pipeline revival to progress on steel and aluminum, that is, energy access as a bargaining chip in trade negotiations. Yet there is no formal mandate or confirmed proponent. The Major Projects Office, created earlier in 2025 to fast-track resource approvals, may play a role, but reviving Keystone would still require new environmental reviews, indigenous consultations, cross-jurisdiction approval, and immense capital. Inside Parliament, opposition members are already pouncing. Critics charge this is political theater, Ottawa offering up a once-cancelled pipeline to the Americans while getting nothing in return. Environmental groups warn that carbon commitments and net zero plans cannot survive such a reversal. Some Liberal MPs voiced concern that alignment with Trump-era energy priorities undermines Canada's sovereignty and climate agenda.
Others counter that energy jobs and economic sovereignty must not be sacrificed in the name of optics. In public polling, such as the Angus Reid Institute's recent survey, 59% of Canadians say they support a pipeline from Alberta to BC's northern coast, though fewer support fast-tracking by federal fiat. Thus, Ottawa is walking a tightrope between climate commitments, federal credibility, provincial pressures, and trade urgency. Energy economists point out that Canada's leverage lies in its reliability as a supplier at a time when the U.S. faces declining shale output. Analysts from the Fraser Institute estimate that every year of pipeline delay costs Canada up to $9 billion in lost GDP potential. Meanwhile, global market trends show that demand for heavy crude remains strong, particularly in Asia, which could make a renewed north-south export corridor more than symbolic. It could be strategic. Make no mistake, saying Keystone XL is back is not enough. The project would have to be reimagined. All prior permits, border crossing rights, easements, and environmental approvals have lapsed. The previous proponent, TC Energy, formally exited in 2021. As the Alberta government itself states, the pipeline project was terminated, the province and TC Energy parted ways. Rebuilding requires new engineering, route studies, negotiations with landowners, indigenous nations, environmental impact assessments, and fresh permitting. The carbon and climate implications are significant, since burning bitumen remains among the highest emissions per barrel. Financial risk is large. Pipeline projects routinely run billions over budget, and cost overruns or legal injunctions are common. Still, supporters frame it as geopolitics in steel cap. Big pipelines reduce bottlenecks, strengthen negotiating leverage, and align energy supply with demand. One energy insider said, "If the best thing we can get done quickly with U.S. buy-in is KXL, we should walk through that door." Precisely because political inertia is easier, crises are when decisions are made. This is not just about politics or pipelines. It's about paychecks, communities, and regional identity. Alberta relies heavily on oil and gas revenue. Bottlenecks in export capacity have cost the province dearly, especially when global oil prices spike. A restored link to U.S. refineries would boost tax receipts, royalties, stimulate peripheral industries, and potentially revive rural towns hit by downturns. Small and medium enterprises involved in pipeline construction, steel, equipment, and logistics would gain traction. One small business owner in Red Deer said, "If new pipeline projects come, our contracts come fast. Welders, fabrication, trucking, all benefit." Communities along the route, farmers, indigenous reserves, landowners, are wary. Many recall broken promises and lawsuits. Some express outright opposition to renewed corridor proposals without full consultation and fair compensation. Environmental activists see this as a betrayal. Canada has pledged under multiple governments to reduce emissions and invest in green energy.
A pipeline revival of this scale could undermine Canada's climate credibility on the world stage, particularly as countries announce more aggressive carbon targets. Regional polarization intensifies. Alberta's frustration with Ottawa's energy policies is long-standing. The province's streamlined referendum laws allow citizens to propose votes on separation or major constitutional questions with lower thresholds. The backdrop of separatist sentiment adds weight to the symbolism of pipeline power. In British Columbia, sentiment is mixed. While 56% of BC residents support a northern pipeline project, over 52% say provinces should be able to veto projects on their land. That reflects deep tensions about local autonomy versus federal ambition. As of mid-October 2025, here's how things might unfold. Alberta intends to submit its Northwestern Pipeline proposal by spring 2026. Ottawa's Major Projects Office may be asked to designate it a project of national interest to fast-track approvals. Meanwhile, revival of Keystone may be pursued in parallel or floated as a fallback. Carney must weigh whether to back the revival, with full risk exposure and political consequences. Ottawa may engage in behind-the-scenes negotiations with U.S. counterparts, pledging concessions or aligning energy diplomacy with trade relief. Environmental groups, Indigenous nations, and opposition MPs will likely mount lawsuits or injunctions if pipeline plans proceed without robust consultation. Climate NGOs will demand holistic carbon accounting, not just project economics. If Keystone proves too politically or legally toxic, Canada may double down on routes like the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which was recently expanded in May 2024 to increase capacity, or push hard on carbon capture and storage projects such as Alberta's carbon trunk system. If Carney backs the revival and it succeeds, he may deliver a major win: energy diplomacy, jobs, and trade leverage. But failure or backlash could scar Ottawa's credibility and amplify provincial alienation. Reviving Keystone XL is a gamble, a symbolic, economic, and political wager all at once. Across Canada, reactions are polarized. In Saskatchewan, small business councils applaud Carney's move, calling it finally a sign of real action. But in Quebec and the Maritimes, climate activists warn that Ottawa is selling its credibility for crude. On social media, the hashtag #PipelineRevival has trended for 3 consecutive days, revealing just how divided the country remains on what should have been a straightforward economic issue. For Alberta, it's a stake in the ground. Give us routes, give us certainty. For Ottawa, it's a chance to reassert relevance or risk looking reactive to provincial energy agendas. For Canadians, it means watching whether infrastructure, trade, climate, and regional power collide. At the core is a deeper question: who steers Canada's path forward? The federal capital, the provinces, or external partners? If Keystone or its echo becomes real, it could redraw Canada's energy, political, and economic map. If it fails, the fallout will echo far beyond pipelines.
He literally left the country because his plans are collapsing. Watch how Trump loses control. Donald Trump has always thrived on chaos and controversy, but this time, the storm he created has swallowed him whole. Across the United States, the president's grip on politics, business, and public trust is slipping away. The scenes unfolding this October 13, 2025, are a mix of absurd theater and national crisis, a man losing control as the institutions around him buckle under the weight of his own decisions. It began with a post that stunned even his supporters. On his social platform, Trump wrote, "Don't worry about China. It will all be fine. President Xi just had a bad moment. He doesn't want depression for his country, and neither do I." The timing was absurd. Just hours earlier, he had imposed 100% tariffs on Chinese imports, triggering global panic and sending markets plunging. Within a single trading day, the S&P 500 fell nearly 3%, the worst drop since the spring, while the Dow Jones shed over 900 points. Investors watched as billions evaporated from retirement funds, pension accounts, and small business portfolios. Meanwhile, farmers in the Midwest, once Trump's loyal base, began to feel the consequences. Export contracts with China collapsed overnight. In Iowa and Illinois, soybean and pork shipments were canceled, and local co-ops reported that prices had dropped 35% in 2 weeks. At the same time, farm debt soared as interest rates climbed. One dairy farmer in Wisconsin said, "We can't sell, we can't borrow, and Washington's too busy fighting itself." His voice reflected the despair of thousands across rural America, where the once booming agricultural sector is now in freefall. The White House tried to contain the panic by promising a $15 billion bailout package, but that plan is stuck in limbo because of the ongoing government shutdown. Farmers are calling it Farmageddon, a perfect storm of bad policy and broken promises. In North Dakota, a small machinery supplier closed its doors after 4 decades in business, laying off 25 workers. Its owner said simply, "Tariffs don't protect us, they punish us." For many small and medium-sized enterprises, this crisis is more than economic, it's existential. While Middle America suffers, protests have erupted across the country. In Portland, Chicago, and New York, crowds have filled the streets with massive inflatable effigies of Trump. They depict him as a dictator clutching gold bars, a general riding a golf cart into chaos, or a balloon baby in a suit. One protester in Seattle shouted, he said blue states were war zones. We're showing him what democracy looks like. These images have become viral symbols of a population that no longer fears the man who once dominated the news cycle. Even as the government shut down, Trump was seen spending the weekend at his Florida golf resort.
Dressed in white slacks and a red hat, he smiled for cameras and told his wealthy guests, "Your taxes are coming down, everyone's happy, honey." His granddaughter laughed beside him, and a staffer filmed the scene for social media. The clip spread like wildfire, contrasting his carefree attitude with the grim reality of millions of Americans struggling to buy groceries and pay rent. As one mother in Ohio said in a local interview, "We're skipping meals so our kids can eat, and he's out there golfing." Trump's tendency to celebrate before achieving results is nothing new. He boasted about a Middle East peace deal, calling it the greatest diplomatic achievement since 1948. But experts quickly clarified that it wasn't a peace deal at all, just a temporary ceasefire. When asked about the two-state solution, Trump famously admitted, "I don't know what that is." Meanwhile, Hamas leaders publicly declared they would not disarm unless an independent Palestinian state was recognized. For many observers, this episode perfectly captures Trump's governing style: announce first, fail later, and claim victory regardless of the outcome. Behind the scenes, international diplomats are increasingly frustrated. One European ambassador described him as a man who confuses chaos with leadership. Another warned that Trump's erratic moves are creating a power vacuum that China and Russia are eager to fill. Yet Trump continues to focus on appearances. On Air Force One, he told reporters that Qatar was walking distance from Iran, seemingly unaware of the Persian Gulf separating the two nations. Then he lashed out at a political journalist, calling her fake news, before refusing to take further questions. The cracks are now visible even within his own movement. Congressman Thomas Massie publicly criticized Trump's federal funding schemes, accusing his administration of trying to control private institutions through bribery. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once a vocal supporter, broke ranks as well. Speaking as a business owner, she warned against mass deportations, saying, "We need a smarter plan. You can't just round up every worker." Her comments drew fierce backlash from hardline loyalists, but they reflect a growing unease inside the Republican Party. Meanwhile, Trump's policies are triggering warnings from Wall Street. Analysts have compared the current financial conditions to those preceding the 1929 crash. A series of market sell-offs and crypto collapses have wiped out billions. Bitcoin plunged more than 8% in a single day after Trump's tariff threats, while U.S. manufacturing stocks recorded their steepest declines since the pandemic. Major banks are cutting forecasts for economic growth to below 1%, and small business confidence has fallen to a 5-year low. Jamie Dimon, CEO of America's largest bank, warned that policy volatility is killing investor confidence. As the crisis deepens, Trump's response has been to double down on nepotism. In a move that shocked even his supporters, he floated the idea of appointing his teenage son, Barron, to oversee the American operations of TikTok if the company is forced to restructure. The proposal drew bipartisan outrage, with ethics experts calling it a parody of good governance. One former White House advisor said privately, "He's turning the presidency into a family franchise. There are no boundaries anymore." Abroad, America's allies are distancing themselves. Canada, France, and the United Kingdom have begun trade talks without U.S. participation, exploring what one European diplomat called a post-Trump economic map. In Asia, Japan and South Korea are pivoting toward joint agreements that exclude Washington entirely. "We can't afford to tie our future to an unpredictable partner," said one Japanese trade official. Inside the country, signs of social strain are everywhere. Consumer confidence has fallen to its lowest point in 15 years. Inflation remains high, with food prices up 9% year over year. Mortgage defaults are quietly climbing as interest rates squeeze households. The average American family is paying nearly $700 more per month for basic expenses than they did a year ago. At the same time, Trump insists the economy is stronger than ever. Economists call it denial. Voters call it delusion. Even among former loyalists, there's disillusionment.
One small trucking company owner in Texas said, "I voted for him twice, but now my business is dying. Fuel costs, tariffs, everything's gone crazy." The trucking industry has been hit especially hard, with freight demand dropping 11% since the tariff hikes began. Logistics firms are cutting staff and delaying equipment purchases, further slowing an already fragile supply chain. The final blow to Trump's image may be symbolic rather than political. Last week, as he boarded Air Force One, cameras caught him struggling to close an umbrella in the wind. The clip has been replayed millions of times online, a metaphor for a man losing control of even the simplest tasks. To his critics, it represents everything about his leadership: bluster without substance, performance without purpose. And yet, despite the chaos, Trump remains defiant. He continues to claim he has restored America's greatness, even as its economy falters and its global influence shrinks. His social media feeds are filled with recycled slogans and self-congratulation. He reposts praise from fringe commentators and insists he is on the verge of historic success. But the facts tell another story: a fractured movement, a crumbling economy, and a nation divided. As Trump flies to the Middle East on yet another taxpayer-funded trip, his critics at home are asking a simple question: who's actually running the country? With key agencies understaffed and half of Washington paralyzed by infighting, many fear that policy is now being dictated by impulse rather than strategy. "We're living in a tweet-based government," one former official remarked. Decisions are made at 2 a.m. and reversed by breakfast.
The ripple effects are global. Energy markets are volatile, trade routes uncertain, and military alliances strained. In Europe, leaders warned that America's instability could embolden adversaries. "The world is watching a superpower self-destruct in real time," said a senior EU official. The sentiment is echoed by analysts who believe the next global recession may begin in the United States, triggered by political dysfunction and economic mismanagement. Ordinary Americans are paying the price. Families are cutting back on essentials, skipping medical visits, and delaying home purchases. Small businesses that survived the pandemic now face extinction under the weight of tariffs and inflation. One auto parts manufacturer in Michigan said, "We've been through recessions before, but this feels different. It's like the government is the problem, not the solution." In the end, Trump's downfall is not the work of his enemies, but the result of his own contradictions. A man who preaches strength, but rules by chaos, who claims victory while everything around him burns. His legacy, once built on defiance, now looks like delusion. The markets are nervous, allies are gone, and even his base is beginning to crack. As one exhausted voter in Pennsylvania summed it up, he promised to drain the swamp, but it turns out he was the swamp all along. For now, America waits, watching as the man who once vowed to make the country great again loses control of the very world he created. The question is no longer whether Donald Trump can lead, but whether the nation can endure the consequences of his leadership much longer.